Hello, hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. You know who I am. I'm E. Jean Pemberton Jones of Enda's BOOKtique. We are located in Duncanville, Texas, the beautiful suburb of Dallas, Texas, one of my favorite cities. I've been doing a lot of things here, so it's somewhere where I like to hang out. Of course, if you've been following me and you've been close to me, you know I've been in Duncanville for a long time with my radio station, and then I started my school here. And now, of course, we have this amazing bookstore. I love this bookstore because this is something that God really put into my heart. It was not part of my bucket list. It was something that I was inspired to do on a trip. And from that inspiration, I came back to Dallas. This was just a year ago, a little over a year ago, and I came back and launched this bookstore. So I love the bookstore. It has also put me on an assignment to do more reading. So I guess God was telling me I wasn't reading enough. So he knew how to get me to read more by starting a bookstore. I have an amazing, wonderful person who is my guest today. And before I introduce to her, we know it is so much going on in our country, so much that is going on in our world. I do want to remind everyone that this is the month that we're bringing awareness to suicide prevention as well as to mental health. And so I wanted to make sure that everybody continues to pray for people who you know are struggling with mental health, people who you know that have struggled with suicide attempts. You know, we want to keep those persons in prayer. So much is going on in the world. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. I know what that feels like to be overwhelmed. I don't think you can ever be too old to get overwhelmed. I think it just happens on a continuum. And so with that, we just got to continue to pray for each other and be there for each other. I also want to bring awareness to Chief Bader, who is no longer with us, Justice Chief Bader. She passed away this past weekend. Our prayers are with the family. She was an incredible woman on the Supreme Court, and she is truly going to be missed. But we have some more Chief Baders out there that are on the grind, and we are praying that God will lift you up, whoever you are, to be in position, to be empowered, to step up to the plate and do what God has called you to do and be who God has called you to be. We also want to pray for Breonna Taylor's family and for those who are closely connected, and even to all of us who are connected to her because of what has happened and the outcome. The criminal justice system is a very finicky system. This is not the place to discuss that. I will talk about that later on tonight during my Bible study, but I do want to acknowledge and say, lift up, because she is a sister. This is a bookstore for women, about women, and I cannot, not acknowledge the fact that we are definitely praying for the family. Now, I have a wonderful sister that I've known, and I'm going to age us a little bit because my oldest son is 29 years old. So I know I've known her for at least 29. He just turned 29. So I've known her for at least probably 29, 28 years. And we met at Friendship West Baptist Church, where my father ministry is Dr. Freddie Haynes III. And her husband was the co-pastor with Dr. Haynes, and was doing an amazing job. And that's where I met Lisa. And then God called them to launch their own ministry, their own church. And they're doing some amazing things in the North Dallas community area, but not just there, to everybody who is connected to that. Ever since I've known Lisa, she's been focused, she's been disciplined. I always applaud her for that. One day I'm going to grow up and be like her and be that disciplined and be that mature. She has degrees, she has experiences. What I didn't know is that she had a banking background. So that is something that I learned very recently about Lisa, and from her background and her commitment to the people, the body of Christ, she has written a book called Holy Borrowers. So I wish I had this book before I started my business, but I thank God that I have it just in time before I make some horrific decisions that would just catastrophically upscale and downgrade and just turn over my business as a new bookstore owner. And so this book is incredible. It says equipping church leaders for building finances, but I'm going to share with you whether you are a church leader, whether you are in the church, out of the church, whatever your issue is, whatever your struggle is, or whatever your situation is, this book is a very good book that is knowledgeable. It comes from someone who has a history and a relationship with banking and finances. And oftentimes we get our information from people who talk the information based on their research, but they lack the experiences and they didn't sit at the table with bankers, with the who's who's. So I'm going to bring on Lisa Miller Autry. Hey, Lisa, how are you doing, my sister?
Hey, Jean, it is great to see you. And first of all, thank you for having me. Second of all, shout out to you for everything that you're doing and your bookstore. And I'm old enough in Dallas to remember Joe Kays
Yes.
And what was our friend over
Emma
in
Rogers. She had
yes.
her. Yes.
So I bookstores, Amazon can't do what Jean is
Right.
doing. So I salute you
Thank you
for being in our community and for the entire community. And then really your mother, your family, y'all have
Yes.
been doing it for years. So grateful to be here.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about Lisa. And before we get really nitty gritty into your book, let's give some history about who you are and where you come from, your background, and just give us a snapshot about Lisa Autry.
Okay. I was born and raised in New York. I used to talk like this. And I left New York in 85, met my husband in California, went to school out there, blind date, Terrence Autry. We relocated to Dallas in 1990, a year after we were married. I actually became a Christian about a year before that. And
Wow.
so we moved here for him to go to seminary, which kind of blew my mind because, okay, now I'm going to be a minister's wife. And the original plan was for us to move back to California. And here we are 30 something years later, 2 sons later who were born and raised in the Dallas area. So I became a minister along the way, accepted my call to preach, and had met at Friendship West. Shout out to Pastor Haynes and Deborah. And went into banking at the same time. So here I have ministry, I had banking, and really retired from banking in April 2019, about a year and a half ago now.
Wow.
So our church is Christ Community up in the Richardson area. And as you said, I've recently completed a book, which we will talk about.
Absolutely. And a shout out to your wonderful husband, Dr. Terrence Autry. And of course, his ministry is amazing. And to your 2 sons,
Terrence and Daniel, yes.
Mothers of boys, mothers of sons. So prayer for all of us as we have our sons. And you guys have done an amazing job. I get a chance to see a little bit of the postings. We're proud parents of our boys. So when they do things, we just plaster it all over social media.
And men now, aren't they?
Yes, they're grown men. They're not kind of
African-American men.
Men. My son reminded me of that. He just had his birthday, September the 8th. And he's like, Mom, I'm 29. I was like, you're knocking on 30? Oh my gosh, I'm getting really old.
Right.
And he has kids already, so I'm a GG, but they're grown men making grown men decisions. And I had to figure out how to be a parent to an adult child, which was a huge transition for me. But I'm learning it day by day. And like you said, they're grown men now. So let's talk about Lisa's book. As you can see in her backdrop, as you can see in my backdrop, she has a book titled Holy Borrowers. And it also has underneath Equipping Church Leaders for Building Finance. And I got a chance, she brought this to me. Actually, I saw she published it. I was like, oh, I gotta get this into my bookstore because oftentimes we in the Christian community, we don't really talk about finances. Even in African-American community, and I just don't want to say Christian, but in the African-American community and in the African-American church, when I say finances, I'm not speaking of passing the plate. I'm speaking of financial responsibility and building our community to be healthy in a very financial way. Growing up, even, that's not always the type of discussion that we receive. And that's why when I saw this book, I was like, we've got to get more books in our bookstore that helps us to be more holistic as relates to how we live, because poor finances can lead to stress, especially in 2020, where we're going through COVID-19, businesses are closing, people are losing their jobs. This book is a very helpful book to help us, to guide us through some of those very tough times. So Lisa, what I want you to do is first, can you share with me what inspired you to write this book?
Really, you said a lot of it. And I'll go back, even I went to business school and I majored in finance and marketing. That's back in the dark ages. In '87, I graduated and started working in commercial banking at the time. And commercial banking is just banking to businesses, organizations that includes churches. And when I went through the training program, the first thing I realized, I said, I wish I had known this information in business school. So even having a finance background, my eyes opened up to how banks look at finance, how they make their loan decisions, that if they're financing, that's the fancy word, it's just money, how they make their decisions. And so even going back then, it just was in my head, like not just we African Americans, we outside of banks really don't understand how they go about doing this. Now we kind of get a look at it on the personal side. So our mortgages, or we buy a car or those kind of things, we know they ask for certain things, but we're sitting in the seat. We just give them what they need and hope it works out a lot of times. And so over the years, and I was a banker for really 32 years, and I had part of that was consulting about 12 years ago. And part of that realization was we need to know. So I used to do a number of, fancy word is seminars, workshops, call it what you will, meet with people. I'd meet with people at churches. I meet with business owners at my own church. And it really was for small business entrepreneurs. What is the bank looking for? And I would go through that. So that was really, all of that is backdrop. And as the years went on, especially being a member of a church, loving Christ Church, and then being a leader in the church, a pastor's wife, the whole bit. And then I do the finances for our church. I oversee them. I've seen too many churches, and understandably not know what banks are looking for, except it's a bigger deal when we're talking about assets. Assets the size of church buildings. So there's two things that would go on. Either a bank might say no, and we wouldn't understand why the bank is saying no. And sometimes in our community, I'm not saying there's not racism, we would say, oh, it must be racism, which is not always the case. So we wouldn't understand how the decisions are being made when we got a no, and worse, we wouldn't know how to get ready to get a yes. And really the word is empowered. And on the flip side, we had too many churches who were getting a yes, who I'm not even going to say shouldn't have gotten a yes, but the structure that they got it really was detrimental to the church. And for a number of them, it worked out. For too many of them, it didn't. And really, I had, especially a close friend of ours, whose church went into foreclosure, and that was really the last straw. And I said, I need to put on what's up here into a book, because, and really that's the backdrop. So I actually started writing it maybe even 2017. And I was doing that while I was still at the bank. I'd come home, I'd write in the morning, and some days were better than others, and some years were better than others. But I had a view of it. And then in 2019, I really listened to the Lord and really said, it's time to leave banking and do ministry. I don't want to say full time, because I looked at banking as a ministry, but full time in a different way, and focusing on this area. So that's the backdrop of the book.
Yeah. And, a lot of times, and again, it's important for us to start really connected to people who have a seat at the table, who can not just have the book knowledge, but also see the experiences in those conversations. You really don't know how those background conversations are happening. Sometimes, like you said, it can be discriminatory, but we don't even know how to align against that,
Right.
and pivot around that if we're not even at the table. And if we don't have the right people at the table who can coach us and can teach us and help us to become more fluid as it relates to the discussion when it comes to banking and finances. If you're trying to have your business, you have to have some type of discussion with the right type of people who truly care about our community. That's the other piece as well. And not just put it in the hands of common people who typically are already at the table. Find someone who truly has a heart for our community, that can really bring about change and help us to see what this is all about, and we can be successful. So, and I'm glad you said that. I've heard of churches but businesses, a lot of us, we end up folding under, but unfortunately, a lot of businesses, because we are able to get loans that truly we cannot commit to because our finances aren't in order. And it's not that we can't get it in order, we just don't really understand what that looks like. So
We don't leave a buffer a lot of times, or a cushion, to use a
right,
better word.
right,
So a lot of times we're so glad to get the financing.
right.
And I'm glad you talked about, businesses, because it does go, even though the book is specifically targeting church leaders, so whether it's pastors, bishops, people in the congregation, it really is meant for everybody.
Right.
And too many times, we may get too little money. And so the money we get's enough. So if you're getting to a relatively, now I don't have $10,000 just sitting here, but relatively speaking, $10,000 is a small amount of money, relatively speaking. So we may say, oh, I got $10,000, so I'll get started. I'll do this, I'll do that. But then that $10,000 actually got us in more trouble than it, because if we had waited, maybe we would have found out we needed 50,000.
Right.
But waited to start and done better. Those are the kind of things. I mean, again, we don't know, and I wouldn't know had I not worked inside of a bank.
Right. Yeah. And ministries. A lot of people are launching ministries, right? Or nonprofit
Absolutely.
organizations. This book is wonderful. It's perfect for you if you're saying, I want to launch a ministry, I want to start a nonprofit organization, or I have already launched a ministry, I have already launched a nonprofit organization, but I don't understand the financial side of it. When you wrote this book, Lisa, can you share with us what you learned? Even though I know you sat at the table of banking, I know that as a co-pastor with your husband, and even being in the arena of finances and running the financial operations, writing this book, you said it took a couple of years, you finally published and released it, and you decided it was time to retire. What did you learn when writing the book, Holy Fathers?
One, I'll give personal, and then I'll talk about the book overall. One, I learned, and this is a message for everybody, I could do it. I've been writing a book for years and really literally decades. So one of them is using your voice where you have it, and a lot of that has to do with listening to the Lord, because for years I talked about I am a minister. I went to seminary, the whole bit, and I kept telling the Lord.
You went to a hard seminary too.
I went to a hard seminary.
Yes.
But I kept telling him, and this is gonna sound disrespectful, so I'm tongue in cheek, but I was like, do you understand that if you're gonna be a minister, you don't work at a bank? And I said it nicer than that, and I prayed through it better than that. But at the end of the day, of course, the Lord absolutely knows what he's doing. And I kind of caught up. So one of the things is learning and being amazed by how he weaves our lives together, everything that we do. So that's one thing. In terms of learning the book, it really was for everyone, it really was trying to find that balance. And I hope I did it. You don't want to come across and just have a book that's filled with all of these financials. And quite honestly, there are not that many books out there. There really aren't that many books out there for church leaders, period, in any denomination in this area of finance. There's a whole lot of books on how to have people give. But in terms of managing the finances, one to give, they're not out there. And the ones that I saw, and there's no disrespect, most of them, and I could count them on one hand, but most of them are, oh, here's what a balance sheet is. Here's what an income statement is. And most people would just go, they're not going,
Right.
they may try to learn it, but most people, if I were me and I didn't have a finance background, I'd hand it to somebody else and say, you figure this out. So
Exactly.
it really was trying to find that balance between, financials, but to speak in a language that everybody can understand, everyday language, and then quite honestly, that it's biblically based.
Yes.
And so learning to do those kind of things, I emulate that in my life. I pray I do, but to put that in writing in a book, to be able to kind of balance all of that was not easy. I'll say it that way.
Right. And so you're even discussing some of the challenges that you had about the book. And we know the main audience, of course, is for church leaders, and which is important, because we saw just a growth of mega churches and a growth of individual churches. And so people were just growing churches, and we're in COVID-19, so it's a little bit different. But I would say even more so, there's a greater challenge with COVID-19. So with your book, what is it that someone can say, this is a book that can help me, because now it's not necessarily growing my church. I'm in COVID-19. I'm gonna have to try to figure out how to maintain my finances, getting loans. Even though the government has provided some type of support, what can they get out of your book to help them to be able to, or even a minister of nonprofit organization or business, what can they get out of your book to help them to survive 2020?
It's a great question. And it's funny, the book, the backdrop, even though it's recently written, a lot of the stories in the book are with the backdrop of the Great Recession, quote unquote, Great Recession, that goes back to 2007, 2008, around that time period. And so if you look, I talked about personally knowing people who went, if they didn't get foreclosed, I know people who had churches foreclosed, but a lot of them were in, quote unquote, the workout loan department. The loan wasn't going the way it's supposed to go. And that caused all kinds of stress. So in the midst of COVID-19 and everything we're dealing with the economy now and the impact, all on us, but even including economically, it's completely relevant, and it's relevant for every age. And a lot of it is, one of the things is sometimes we make decisions as Christians, we're following faith, which we should, which we're supposed to, but trying to understand where do faith and economics meet? Where do faith and when is God saying no? And so a lot of times if we don't know, we'll say, well, I'm going to go forward and I'm going to do because I believe God is telling me to do it this way. And I'm not questioning what God is telling anybody else. I can only tell you what I've seen, and even what people have said in hindsight. That, okay, maybe I didn't hear him right, or it wasn't for right now. So there's certain things, it may, God is not, he's not somebody who rushes. And a lot of times what is that? A day is like 1,000 years is like a day. It may not be 1,000 years, but God is not, if you said, well, I need to wait 2 years, that sounds a lot of times like forever for us, but for God, it's like, there's a lot of things we can do in the meantime. So the book is really for, our church was a church plant. Friendship West actually we were their first church plant. So going back to 1998 is when we incorporated and had our first service in January 99. There were things, because I'm a banker, there were things as a church plant, and I'm talking about when we had 3 people, my husband and I being 2 of them. There were things we did at that time to get ready, even though we weren't ready for a loan or a building finance. And so those are the kind of things, back to your question, people can be doing that right now. So it's not always about, well, I need to jump and do this. What can I be doing now? Even if my, some people's giving is way up, some people's is steady, and some people's is way down. Regardless of where we are as ministries and nonprofits and even businesses, what can I be doing now to get ready? This is, and certainly if you're a new ministry, What can I be putting in place right now so that when that door does open, that opportunity does open, I'm ready for it.
Right. So with someone who has a loan with a bank, you know, they have a ministry, they have a business, they have a church, and, you know, financially things are going south. And you talk about, you know, a banker's perspective in your book and when things are going south. Can you just, without giving the goods of the book, you know, because we want people to get the book and read it, but
Right.
for someone who has a loan out there and we're now almost approaching, it depends on how your fiscal year is set up. For some people, the fiscal year starts in September. For some, it starts in January.
Right.
Others, it starts in July, just all depends. But with the physical year going into its last quarter, and so many things up in the air and their finances are funny, strange, what would you recommend for someone who has a loan with the bank or a financial situation and it's going south? What recommendations for surviving this year would you provide to someone who has a loan?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that chapter, as you said, does go into that from a banker's perspective, and then
Right.
also even from an attorney's perspective.
Yes.
It's in there. But one of the basic things, and it's going to sound like I'm on the banker side, but it's the reality, and I'm on both sides from that standpoint. You need to contact your banker, because with the backdrop, bankers, and I say this over and over again, banks do not want to own church buildings.
Right.
Something has gone real, you know, and so I'm talking about from the bank standpoint. Obviously, we don't want them to own our buildings, but they don't want to. So if we talk about even from not just negotiation standpoint, it's moving from them against us. Well, they don't want to own the building. So things turn out better when it's collaborative. It turns out better for everybody. They don't want to own the building and we don't want them to own the building. So they really want to know, is there a way we, meaning the bank doesn't want the write-off either, can we get through this together? And so the bank, talking to the banker, number one, it shows you're willing to work with them. It shows, and even in terms of they do have rights. You know, a lot of times, you know, it gets really, you know, it can get really ugly. And I've sat on the banker side. I've been as a banker in my own community, I've been accused of all kinds of things. Oh, she's with the bank, or she, you know, all the things people can say. But at the end of the day, I don't care if it's $100,000 loan. I don't care if it's $5 million loan, more or less. That's the bank's money in there. And a lot of times we forget that because we're saying, well, that's my building. It is our building, but that's the bank's money. It was a loan, not a gift. So they actually do have rights. So if the more it can be collaborative, how do we work this out together? So even if you go to if you're transferred to, they have all kinds of nice names for it, but I call it a workout loan department, and I work with one. That just means they are trying, that's where loans go that are not being paid according to plan. That doesn't mean it's all over. That doesn't mean you can't be transferred back out. But during this time, it's working with them. So they may say things like, you know, what are your expenses? What kind of expenses can you cut? It may include salaries. And I'm not just talking about staff, like laying off staff. It may be reducing salaries. It may, you know, those are the kind of things, but it's getting to the table, talking to them and coming up with a plan together that works on both sides, and recognizing nobody's happy about where anybody is. They're not happy and we're sure not happy, but the whole goal is, if possible, to be able to work it out so you can stay in your church until things come back up again.
Right. And I appreciate you sharing that. When I worked in real estate for a very long time, and even in the title company, that was one of the key things is, you know, mortgage companies don't want your home, really do not, because they're going to have to figure out how to move that around and do what they need to do. So it's best to try to communicate and see what options are available to you in this situation. What would you say to someone who is looking to get in this time of age and stage.
Mhm.
They're financially going through a tough situation and they're looking to try to borrow money. Um, what steps would you recommend for them, or how do they need to make sure that they're healthy and prepared to be able to get a loan? Because sometimes people think I need to get a loan to bail myself out. Is that the right approach? Or is it the right approach to say, first, let me find myself to be more healthy financially before I end up making a decision to go get a loan? When is the right time to make a decision to get a loan from a bank?
Yeah, it's a great question. And honestly, and this is, it's in the book, but the things to think about, the big picture, there are at minimum 5 things the bank is looking for.
Mhm.
And, and one of them, and I could, cash flow. And
Yeah.
so can we pay back the loan is going to be the basic question. So if we talk about, to your question, getting a loan, because that's going to help me get through this time, a banker or finance company, not a payday loan.
Right.
Finance company is going to ask, how am I going to get paid back? And if you don't have an answer and you're not even comfortable with being able to pay the bank back,
Right.
then it's not a position to, that's not a position to get a loan. They are also going to ask for collateral, which is basically the backup plan. So if you get a car loan, the car is the collateral, and they're looking at what your income is coming in. So, those are just 2 of the things they're looking for. And if those things aren't in place, as hard as it is, and it doesn't make it's a tough place to be in, and that's putting it lightly. A
Right.
loan isn't the answer.
Right.
And as a side note, and I'm not a payday loan expert, payday loans are not the answer,
Right.
because they're killing our community, because they are going to get paid back, but you end up paying more in interest. Doing is kicking the can down the road into next
Right.
month. And I recognize, when we're going through things and we don't have, we're getting put out. I'm not trying to get in anybody's situation and say it's not a big deal, because it is.
Right.
But the payday loans are killing our community and they're profiting off our community. So that's not the answer either.
Right.
That was for free, and that's not in my book.
And we've heard, of course, Pastor Haynes, my pastor, has Father Ministry talked about the crippling of payday loans and those companies in our community, and how it really does put you in a situation that ties you unnecessarily for a long period of time. And it seems like it's a quick fix. And like you said, I'm not the one to try to tell someone how to work things out. I do want to say it is important just to think about the process, to see if there's a way that you can get support in a different kind of way, or something that you shared, which we don't often want to do, is you have to reduce your financial output, right? A lot of times we don't want to do that. So you have to ask yourself those hard questions. And could be only for a season, but it is an important season that helps you to pivot into a better situation. For a business, you have to ask yourself this question: do you have extra things that you can reduce? If it's not staff, maybe other types of perks that you have within your business that you might have to put to the side and let it go, financially. If you're an individual, do you need to have cable? That's a good example of that. A lot of people are getting away from it, but do you need to have cable? Do you need to have this? Look at where your money is going out. And it seems like it's a little bit, but it adds up over time. So do you even really have a budget? So my question to you, Miss Lisa, do you counsel people? Do you set up financial time to help people and guide them along the way with churches or individuals? If they wanted to reach out to you and say, hey, I need this type of counseling, do you have it set up that way? You have this amazing book. So what's going on via expanding the book?
Yeah, actually, and I don't do personal counseling
Okay.
on the finance side. I do count, and that's just a matter of time. There's only so much time in a day.
Yes.
I do work with churches and nonprofits.
Okay.
And I have Holy Borrowers. It's actually LLC, and then I have a consulting company that's not specifically for churches, Acceleration Advisors LLC, and I'll talk about that afterward. But quite honestly, the book is meant to go places I'll never go. Um, and the big thing is, and I really did look, it's not, the information is not out there.
Right.
And so the book is meant to provide that, but the bigger picture, quite honestly, is meant to come alongside churches and church leaders and talk to them individually. Now in COVID, we're not showing up in places like we
Right.
would have, but in terms of Zoom, like what we're doing now, Zoom conference calls, those type of workshops I am doing. And so that's something that, and I'll work with any size churches, even during the Paycheck Protection Program, during when churches were included in those looking for money. I talked to a number of church leaders just to be able to provide that ministry, and it is a ministry. So that is available, and you know that we can certainly talk about that, because that was the goal. The book is meant to provide information, but you know, having somebody come alongside and coach and even just talk, and what do you think about that? That's really the bigger goal for our churches. My goal is for us to be empowered.
Yeah.
That really is. This is not about selling books, and if that were the case, I wouldn't be even talking about this now. I don't care about that. I care about the outcome. And for us as churches, for God's kingdom, for us in the African American community, in the Latino community, in every community, for small business owners of all ethnicities and backgrounds, if we don't have somebody on our staff or in our family who is an accountant and really even more a banker, then we are working with one hand tied behind our backs. And that's not empowering. We need to be able to know how to make great decisions for where we're headed.
Right. Is there, Lisa, and based on your research for the book, and one of the things that you shared, there is very little to no book that provides the type of support system for individuals and organizations who need to really understand what it is as it relates to finances, financial responsibility, and how there are things out there that truly can help us to be better as we operate our business. Is there any type of that you are aware of, things out there in place where people can go and reach out? And does your book provide that, you know, as a place where people can go and say, hey, this is what I want to do. How do I connect to the resources? How do I connect to the information so that I can be a better person based on the information that you shared in the book?
Yeah, there's, again, the books aren't there. It's not, there's no one place that says, oh, you can go here. I can tell you there are some organizations, well, let me start with this. There are very good bankers out there.
Okay.
So let me start there. The book is meant for church leaders. We already talked about entrepreneurs. It's also meant for bankers to provide to your clients. But if you have a very good banker, that banker will take the time to work through and do those kind of things. Now, I am still saying we shouldn't be putting all of our, decision-making and power in the hands of a banker and not understanding why they're saying, he or she is saying what they're saying.
Right.
So part of that is when you're talking to bankers and you're evaluating where you bank, is this a bank that treats me like a number? Are they an 800 number? Am I too small for them? Where they say they don't have the time? Because you shouldn't be, and I have nothing against branches, meaning going into a retail outlet, but they're not set up to help small businesses. That's not, there's helped up to help me personally, help you personally. Okay. So it really is finding a right banker who can be that advisor for you and treats you like a customer or potential customer should be treated. There are other groups out there, and I'll give a shout out. Service Realty is a real estate broker out there. And over the years, they have come alongside and helped bank, those who are looking for financing. NAREB, National Association of Real Estate Brokers, they're getting equipped. So there are people and groups out there who are trying to come alongside. I said myself, but those are the others that I can think of. But the best thing, quite honestly, is understanding it yourself, because these are your assets. This is our life. So it's not putting the power, I keep saying power, in somebody else's hands for what God wants to do with our own life and our own assets.
Right. So the type of banking, and I would say character, you talked about character in your book, but what character should we look for when we're saying, I'm a church and I want to bank with a certain church, certain bank that I know that truly will service my needs? What character should we look for from a banking organization or from the banking industry to say that I not only do I want to put my money in this institution, but I believe that this institution will partner with me so that I can be successful with my finances?
Yeah, one is finding out, does the bank, do they do church loans? That's a question. And really, when you start with 800 numbers, it's finding, a lot of banks work through websites first. And if you don't know somebody who knows somebody, it's, starting there and saying you're interested in, you're basically interested in speaking with someone. If they contact me, if someone wants to take the time out to look at my LinkedIn page, the bank I just came out of, I think is a fantastic bank. They're not the only ones out there, but it really is, do they take the time? Will they take the time? Will someone in that organization that's outside of who's not a branch manager, no shade on branch managers, but they're a commercial banker, will they take the time to talk to me? That seems like it's basic, but you would be surprised at the number of people who say, well, how big are you? How big is your church? And they say, well, and they'll say no. They'll say it in a number of ways, but they say no. So you're supposed to, if your money is somewhere, I don't care what size your deposits are, if your money is somewhere and you're looking to grow and you're looking to one day have financing, or you have financing, you deserve the right to have a bank serving you, have a bank be a trusted advisor to you. So when you talk about character, some of it is real basic. Are they looking at you as an inconvenience? Are they looking at you like you're the customer that they should be not tolerating, but actually chasing? And so you're the customer. They are looking for business. And we understand, whether it's dating or relationships, we understand when someone's not that interested. And that's something we should do. I think that's something we deserve. And a lot of times we just sit in a bank long because it's inconvenient to move, or it may cost us something to move, but I think it costs us more in the long run.
Well, Lisa, let's talk about how we can get a copy of your book. Of course, we have it here at Enda's BOOKtique, but your book is available at a lot of different places, and you have your own website. So let's give some information, not only just how to get a copy of your book, but how to reach out to Lisa Miller Autry for more finance advice. And for those who have churches and businesses, how can they connect to you?
Thank you, Jean. And again, at your bookstore, thank you very much. And I understand we've already had a sale there. We just went in last week, so thank you. Amazon.com, but for more personalized approach, holyborrowers.com, and that's www.holyborrowers.com. I have an online store there. And quite honestly, at my online store and at Enda's, that's going to be your best price. Through my website, you also get an autographed copy if you're interested in doing that. In terms of being in touch with me, I'm on all the social media platforms, but in terms of workshops for Holy Borrowers in particular, that's the same website, because there is a page within there, again, holyborrowers.com. And when you go in there, you can not only purchase a book there, but you can actually get more information about workshops. And again, we're talking at this point, virtual workshops.
Right.
So it can really be anywhere across the country. And I've actually participated in national kind of discussions in terms of financing for churches. You know, there's so much downside and death with COVID, but the
Right.
virtual nature of it, it has moved us to being able to communicate nationwide. So you can contact me there. And then again, if you're not a church, accelerationadvisors.com is the other place to reach me. And then
All right.
I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn as well.
You are. Yes, you are. And thank you for the plug. I appreciate you. So, all
Appreciate
right.
you, Jane. Thank you
Yes,
so much
ma'am.
for having me. I appreciate, appreciate the friendship and the time you've
Yes.
given me to talk about this.
Yes, ma'am. And thank you for this amazing book. Thank you for this wonderful product. I am encouraging you, if you are starting, some of you have come to me and you talk about your finances and you talk about getting yourself in position to expand your business, your ministry. And listen, I launched this bookstore during COVID-19. I mean, we kicked it off last year, but we moved into a storefront this year. We opened June the 1st in the storefront. So yes, we are both faith believers. We believe in Christ, but I also believe that there's a responsibility to knowing what's available to you. And God gives us a way where we can research, we can connect to resources. And this is an amazing book. And I didn't have this book before I got started, but you can best believe I've already read it. And I am using the principles that are in this book to make sure that I stay financially healthy as a brand new bookstore. So I'm encouraging you to get this book. We do have it for you to pick up. You can go to my website at Enda's BOOKtique. It is available to you there on my website, as well as to Lisa Miller Autry website as well. I've got to get used to the Miller. I didn't know the Miller part yet. I just got the Miller recently.
Maiden name.
I know, no, I get it. I put mine in there as well.
Amen.
So, all right, everybody, we appreciate you so much. Again, if you have questions, you can always contact us and email us. If you want to reach out to Lisa, you can do that as well. You guys have an amazing Thursday. Make sure you stay safe. Make sure you stay sane. And please stay COVID virus free, please. All right, God bless.